Hello everyone! In this video we're going to tell you all you need to know about the best champions you can use in solo queue for patch 8.20. This patch has brought a couple of nerfs for the champions who were utterly dominating the others in the previous patches. Furthermore, one of the key junglers has been nerfed as well, so we'll review the major changes made to every role separately. The ones more versatile and some of the others. Fair warning, this tier list is made for platinum players and lower. Many of the S tier champions do not use any complex mechanics and will fit both the more experienced players and the rookies alike. So guys, get some popcorn and let's get started. And let's start off with the top lane. The changes for top lane were insignificant at best, with only Sion getting a small nerf. In S tier there are still 3 bruisers, all of whom are extremely powerful when it comes to solo queue, and also one tank, Sion. All 3 of the bruisers can snowball fairly easily, which is exactly why they're so good for solo queue. Once you gain your early advantage, it will be very easy for you to increase it, and leave the enemy team with fewer chances of stopping you. But besides the S tier, we should also note Camille and Urgot, both of whom have got a lot more popular in the last few patches, and got a decent win rate. So let's start off with Darius, as he got a solid buff in the previous patch, that is 8.19, which was aimed at balancing the tournament meta out. In patch 8.20, Darius remains one of the strongest top laners of solo queue. He's got no access to gap closes like Irelia or Jax do. Until he hits level 6, it's fairly easy to gank and kill him together with your jungler. Darius is fairly strong at dueling during the early stages of the match, and once he does hit level 6, he becomes strong enough to turn the enemy ganks around and kill 2 champions at once, all by himself. Unlike Irelia or Jax, Darius is extremely powerful when it comes to mid to late game teamfighting, mostly because of his ultimate and his ability to initiate the fights using his Flash E combo. This champion is good for both the skilled players and the rookies. Next up, Irelia. Irelia has an extreme amount of mobility, a stun and a gap closer, all of which allow her to trade effectively during the laning phase, and also set up the ganks for her jungler. In the mid to late game, she'd usually be split pushing, but can also join her team for team fighting. This champion will better suit the more experienced players, since she uses a couple of complex game mechanics. Next up, Jax. He's rather similar to Irelia. He's got a stun and also gap closer. But Jax is exceptionally good against auto-attacking champions. In the mid to late game, he'd also be split pushing a lot, but just like Irelia, he can join his teammates and help them out. This champion can suit both the veteran players and the rookies alike. Sion is an excellent top laner for solo queue, and he remains that way despite the nerf he's got in this patch. There are several popular builds the players like to use when playing Sion. The main ones are Damage Sion and Tank Sion. When building Damage Sion, you'll be dealing tons of damage both with your spells and with your auto attacks. This build is more suitable for veterans. Tank Sion, on the other hand, will be useful regardless of his game situation. Sion's ultimate allows him to initiate teamfights fairly easily. Solo queue players will often make bad macro decisions, and Sion has all the tools necessary to punish them for it. When laning, Sion can clear the minions out very quickly, and once he hits level 6, it becomes fairly easy to set up the ganks on his lane opponent. Furthermore, Sion himself can rotate to other lanes and help his teammates out, using that same ultimate ability to move himself around. The jungle is still being dominated by aggressive champions. Patch 8.20 has brought in nerfs to Evelynn and specifically her early game, and also a slight nerf to Graves. Furthermore, the Dark Harvest rune has also been nerfed. It remains as useful in late game, but its early to mid game damage output has been significantly reduced. All of the S tier champions are very strong snowballers, which makes them all a perfect fit for the solo queue. For each of them, your playstyle should always be aggressive, so you need to gank as much as you can and only farm when it's absolutely necessary. Graves remains a very strong jungler despite the slight nerf. He clears the jungle pretty quickly and thus can counter jungle effectively. To earn more gold, he can either farm his own jungle, farm the enemy jungle, or go ahead and gank everything and everyone he sees. The latter will be the best thing to do in solo queue, since the players will often make individual mistakes. Graves is slightly dependent on his items, so it will be important for you to get ahead earlier on, to start dealing tons of damage in mid to late game. Graves can either build as a glass cannon, that is a pure damage dealer, or he can go as a bruiser. He's got no complex mechanics in his kit, so he'll suit both the rookies and the veteran junglers alike. Next up, Nidalee. In good hands, she can be very strong, regardless of the rating levels she's played in. We should note that if you have no idea how to play her, it's best to train and practice in normal matches at first, and only then start using her for your ranked matches. Her main strength is in the early game. Thanks to her high mobility and quick clearing speeds, she can gank quite a lot earlier on, and thus give her teammates a very strong boost. Furthermore, she's one of the best counter junglers in the game. When playing against weaker junglers, Nidalee can simply dominate over them from the very beginning and prevent them from growing stronger. Camille has a tough time clearing the jungle, however her ganks are extremely lethal starting from her level 2. And she's especially powerful against less than mobile champions. She's heavily dependent on her item build, and it is very important for her to buy the Trinity Force in time. So you'll have to gank a lot during the early game. Also, Camille can outduel most of the meta junglers, but if something goes wrong, she can always avoid the fight using her E. Once she reaches level 6, her ganks step up onto the next level. It wouldn't even matter if the enemy has an escape ability or not anymore. Her ultimate will prevent anyone from getting away. This champion can fit both the veteran players and rookies alike. Xin Zhao is a perfect choice for someone who has just started to jungle. He's got decent jungle clearing and some very strong tools for ganking. Furthermore, most of the junglers will lose to him in a fair duel. Because of that, Xin Zhao is very good at controlling the river, the scuttle crabs and the vision around the river. He can start ganking as early as he reaches level 2. With a couple of items complete, Xin Zhao can start focusing the enemy tanks as they attack his carries, or just rush into the enemy backline and try to do the opposite. We would really recommend this champion for the newer jungler players, but it doesn't mean that the veterans shouldn't play this champion at all. As for mid laners, only Ahri received a very solid nerf, which has actually moved her down into the A tier. As a result, our tier list for mid lane now consists of 3 mages with excellent wave clearing and very useful ultimates. Lissandra and Malzahar specifically are just as good at ganking and teamfighting too. Aside from those 3, there are also Kassadin and Irelia. Kassadin is a melee assassin mage and is very strong against most of the mages. Irelia, on the other hand, is a bruiser who is very effective in solo queue, but requires a lot of mechanical skill to be successful. So let's start with Lissandra. Early on, Lissandra can clear the minions out very quickly. Furthermore, it's pretty easy for her to set up ganks thanks to her gap closes and crowd control, and it becomes even easier once she reaches level 6. That same ultimate can also be used to save yourself from the ganks aimed your way. But Lissandra's main strength is in teamfighting. All of her spells have area of effect, which is why you would really want to fight in tight and narrow spaces. Lissandra doesn't employ any complex mechanics and will suit both the newer and more experienced mid lane players. Malzahar is a perfect champion for rookie mid laners. Earlier on, he's got a very strong minion clearing speed, but his main power is hidden in his ultimate. With that, he can both set up ganks against his lane opponent and be extremely useful during the teamfights. His flash plus ult combo is just unmatched. When out in the lane, try to avoid being too aggressive when your shield passive is down. After you reach level 6, you can call for the jungler and try to go for a gank, or just push your lane out and rotate to one of the sidelines to provide some help for the rest of your team. In late game, Malzahar starts dealing as much damage to the tanks as he did to the squishes. Again, this champion can be very good for the rookies, as he doesn't have any complex mechanics. Cassiopeia's power comes from your personal skill, specifically your ability to land skill shots. She doesn't have that good wave clearing, but she's a perfect duelist. You can actually start playing aggressively from the very beginning of the match. Because of that, you can easily secure the control over your lane and start rotating to the sidelines or the jungle to help your teammates defeat their opponents. In mid to late game stages, Cassiopeia will be very useful due to her area of effect damage and a very useful ultimate. Playing this champion effectively requires a lot of skill and knowledge, so we would only recommend her to more seasoned players. Now, Kassadin is pretty much a counter pick to many of the mages in the current meta. But you shouldn't pick him when you don't know who is going to play in the enemy mid lane. Kassadin's main power is in his mid and late stages of the game. He is actually quite weak earlier on, up until he reaches level 6. He'd mainly have to focus on farming and poking the opponent from afar using his Q spell. His wave clearing is not perfect either, so the enemy might have a very easy time pushing you underneath the tower. Because of it, you'll lose the control over the lane. Kassadin is also vulnerable to ganks pre-level 6, but once you do reach it, you need to be wise about using your ultimate, as to avoid leaving the openings for the enemy jungler to use. Kassadin is a relatively difficult champion to play, as you need to understand your mid lane matchups and be able to play safe when necessary. However, we'd still recommend him for rookies and veterans alike, as it's not all that difficult to master him. Irelia is one of the few bruisers capable of handling the mid lane. Before she reaches level 6, she remains rather tame and focuses on farming, for the small exceptions where the opponent makes a very serious mistake. But once she does get her ultimate, it becomes a lot easier for her to actually kill her opponent. She's got access to a lot of crowd control and damage, which makes it easy for her to set up ganks for her jungler. In the mid to late game, she can act as a split pusher and play together with her team, depending on the situation. In the bot lane, the only actual change was made to Ezreal. It's difficult to say how strong he will be in this patch so far. We really need more data to provide you with decent analysis. In the bottom lane S tier, there are still 3 marksmen and 1 mage to choose from. Miss Fortune and Jhin aren't auto-attacking all that often and are mostly dealing damage with their spells, with their ultimates being the most useful part of their kits. Kai'Sa, on the other hand, is an auto-attacker with a couple of very interesting mechanics. And finally, Swain is a mage, but is nonetheless strong when it comes to solo queue, especially when paired up with aggressive supports. Let's start off with Miss Fortune. There are 2 different ways you can play this champion. The first one makes use of her maxed out Q and the Dark Harvest Keystone. This choice is more suitable for strong mid to late game, where you'll be able to deal tons of damage with your Q bullets. The second one uses a maxed out E and the Arcane Comet Keystone. This choice is more suitable for early game poking and lane control. But regardless of your keystone choice, her ultimate will be equally useful, mostly during the teamfights. This champion is as good for the newbies as she is for the veterans. Jhin is a marksman who focuses on assisting his team a lot. Aside from his obvious damage output, he's got his W, A and the ultimate, all of which provide tons of support to his teammates during teamfights. Early on, Jhin will mostly focus on farming and will only start to shine when he completes several of his core items. In the mid to late game, Jhin becomes rather useless when it comes to taking the enemy tanks down, but can completely annihilate the enemy squishes. You should keep your distance and play around your W and ultimate abilities. This champion can fit both the veteran players and rookies alike. Kai'Sa is the most difficult champion in this tier. Her main powers are in mid and late stages of the match. She's a full-on hyper carry capable of destroying the entire enemy team when given enough time to get her items running. Early on, she'd mostly be farming. Kai'Sa is a very item-dependent champion, so she needs to avoid taking any risks before she starts to feel confident enough. She's best paired up with defensive supports like Lulu, Janna, Morgana and some others. In teamfights, try to hit the closest of the enemies and avoid taking huge risks, as to avoid getting killed. Unlike the rest of the champions in this tier, Swain is a mage. Most of the mages have left the bot lane meta after the recent patches, and that should tell you a lot about how strong Swain can be when it comes to carrying. He's got a decent amount of crowd control and tons of damage. He's best paired up with aggressive supports, with a lot of initiation and crowd control tools in their kits. In teamfights, Swain can deal a lot of damage to several targets at once. This champion isn't too difficult to master, so we'd recommend him to both the rookies and veterans. Among the supports, we've got a slight nerf made to Nami, but that didn't make her any less capable in terms of peeling for her allies. Much like with all the other roles, aggressiveness is the prevalent trait of a strong support in the current meta. Because of that, solo queue is dominated by the initiating disabler supports. There are 3 of them in our tier. And then we also have Morgana, who acts as a counter to most of such aggressive disablers. Furthermore, Morgana can act like them herself in most matchups and help her carry to secure the early advantage. Also, we should know Thresh and Tahm Kench, both of whom were buffed in this patch. That will definitely increase their pick rates both in tournaments and solo queue matches. We'll start off with Rakan. He's been quite popular for a long time, both in solo queue and out in the professional scene. He's got superior mobility, sustain and one of the best initiation tools in the game. His ultimate can put up to 5 enemies in hard crowd control, which can be enough for his teammates to take them all out quickly. Early on, Rakan can poke his lane opponents with his Q spell. Rakan is somewhat difficult to master, so we'd really only recommend him to players who are really experienced. Next up, Alistar. He's an excellent tank, with a lot of initiation and crowd control tools you'd ever need. He can be aggressive starting from level 2. Furthermore, Alistar can allow for some very effective tower dives and can also be very useful in teamfights. When it comes to the latter, he can either protect his own carry and prevent the enemies from ever reaching them, or engage the enemy backline with his WQ combo. This champion can fit both veteran players and rookies. Pyke is the most difficult champion of this tier. Playing this champion is unlike playing any other support in the game. Pyke's got some strong initiation and crowd control tools, just as he should. Other than that, he's got a very strong AoE damage output coming from his ultimate, which will be especially useful when it comes to teamfighting. This champion is extremely difficult to master, so we'd only recommend him to more experienced players. And finally, Morgana is pretty much a counter pick to most of the aggressive disabler supports, including the ones we have in our S tier. Early on, she can play safely, protecting herself and her carry with her black shield. Or she can play aggressively, trying to land her Q and force a trade around it. In teamfights, Morgana can make herself very useful using her ultimate, especially when she completes Zhonya's Hourglass. This champion is good for both the veteran players and rookies. Well guys, that's it. We hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. And if you did, make sure you share it with your friends and teammates. Adapt to the meta and do not be afraid of trying something new. So on this note guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video and good luck in your solo queue.